Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
I'm Marko Tervonen from the Swedish death metal band The Crown.
Now, Marco, you've been on the podcast once before, back in 2021, around the time that Royal Destroyer was released. Uh, and we had a discussion about the Crown style and how you guys fit into the world of Swedish death metal and what it means to be a Swedish death metal band. Uh, do you feel much has changed since that conversation?
Uh, Maybe yes and no. I would say that we maybe fit in there a bit better now, since I believe this new material, this new album is a bit more melodic. Maybe people refer to the Swedish death metal scene a bit more melodic, maybe. So in that sense, maybe, yeah, we are maybe a bit more Swedish sounding, I would say.
Uh, but at, as we discussed the last time, the Crown has never really fit in with either what was happening in the Stockholm scene or the Gothenburg scene. You
Yeah,
guys were
yeah.
always your own thing. Do you feel that's true? Do you feel like the Crown is kind of its own thing, separate from everything else that's going on around you?
I do, man. I think me or us, we're always felt a bit outsiders, because it's like you mentioned there, like in Sweden, it was always this, Stockholm side, the East Coast, and Gothenburg, West Coast. And funnily enough, they were different sounding as well. I mean, Stockholm had this more entombed thing going on, and Gothenburg had the At the Gates and In Flames, the more melodic styles. And we were always influenced by sort of the roots of all, both those ends. I mean, the American scene, that's obviously where the Stockholm scene got their influences from, Autopsy and stuff like that. But we were heavily influenced by a lot of things that were happening in Florida death metal, basically everything that was recorded in Morrison studios. And at the same time, we did enjoy the early At the Gates and stuff like that. So, but it became quite obvious, when media starts to discuss bands, like when they want to list 10 Stockholm bands, we weren't there. We weren't in the Gothenburg list either. So I do sense that we have been, and we still are, a bit outsiders of it. It's pretty difficult still to categorize us. Which I personally like. We haven't sort of didn't invent our style of playing and kept with it, with the same formula or recipe all the time. We really are a bit all over the place, and I do like it personally, more challenging as a songwriter. So yeah, I still believe we're a bit outsiders and underdog.
I mean, that's an interesting thing that you brought up, the lists, because I feel like
Yeah,
people, maybe record companies and uh, magazines really want to categorize things and put them in a box in a way that's easier to market them or to explain things to them. But then,
yeah,
as the Gothenburg style became more popular, the Stockholm style, fell out of favor. And as, we have this resurgence of old school death metal, the melodic stuff fell out of favor. So do you feel like the
yeah,
Crown, because you guys never really fit with any one scene, like you were able to rise above that? Like, because the Crown is the Crown. Like if you like the
yeah,
Crown,
yeah,
it doesn't really matter like what else is popular. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, I think in that sense we've been a bit stubborn. Obviously, I mean, especially when you start, playing a band, and we were very young, started playing around 15 years old. So you're very, very influenced by your sort of favorite bands. But quite early on, I mean, it's quite funny that, I mean, our very, very first album, The Burning, that was released under the name Crown of Thorns. It's quite funny when you listen to it, because it starts out with this 4-beat song, very melodic, very influenced by like Edge of Sanity. The song number two is like a D-side rip-off song. And then later on the album, there's this weird song called Candles. It's very influenced by Ministry. to be honest.
Oh, that's
Then the
interesting.
album ends with a song that, yeah, that sounds like a black metal song.
Right.
So I remember even back then when reading reviews and stuff, people say, "Oh, what is this style? What is? I mean, what are they trying to do?" And in a sense, we've been a bit stubborn with that and just continue with it. Especially later on with like Hell Is Here album, when we started to enjoy a lot of those energetic punk bands, we brought in that element as well. So pretty early on, we've always had that attitude that. If we like it, we're gonna include it because uh, the Crown is the only death metal band we ever had. So I never sort of, and I write quite a lot music all the time, and I never think that if I come up with something different, oh, I need to start another project or anything. It's always about how we're gonna fit this into the Crown, and it's both good and bad because as you said about the marketing and profiling a band, it becomes difficult when you are a bit all over the place, and it's of course easier and maybe easier for the band to be included in those top 10 Swedish whatever Gothenburg death metal lists or something like that, but we're never part of those. So I feel that we always need to um, fight a bit harder to get some attention.
Mm. That's interesting. Do you feel because when I think of the Crown, I think of, blast beats, but also a little bit of rock and roll, maybe a little bit of classic heavy metal, and a little bit of black
Yeah,
metal influence as well. Um,
yeah.
but do you feel like the Crown is very open as to what you can put in, what you can write musically? Like, do you think is there anything you wouldn't do with the Crown? Is there any kind of song that you wouldn't do with Crown?
Well, actually, there isn't, but I don't think that we should start messing with clean vocals because that's a whole different sort of can of worms in many ways. I mean, first of all, if you're gonna mess with like clean vocals, first of all, you are all of a sudden fighting with the amazing clean singer rock, the Ian Gillians and whatever, Hetfields and all of that. You're in a completely different area if you want to, if you would like to compete with that, so to say. Johan is an amazing death metal vocalist, and I like whatever weird ideas we have had, we have always been able to do it within our sort of death metal bubble. I mean, even on Royal Destroyer, we decided to release one of the singles as the song called "We Drift On," which is basically like a ballad thing. But we managed to figure out how to do it in this band without starting to mess with clean vocals or weird instruments and stuff like that. But as I said, I write a lot of music, and when I send to the guys song ideas, sometimes they're like, "What the hell is this? I mean, what are you trying to do here?" And then I sort of explain, like, yeah, there's a different feel to a different vibe to it, and then we try it out, and yeah, it goes through some crown filters and becomes what it becomes. But I'm really not, to be honest, afraid to do. I can do all kinds of music, but I'm not gonna go into those silly things areas with the you know you know disco drums, distorted drums in the background, whatever. I mean, not that type of. But I want to do it with real instruments, but regarding tempos or beats or vibes or if you're minor chords, major chords, no. I just really try to just trust my gut instinct that is this a good song? Yes, it is. Then it is good. Let's record it. So that's basically in the end how easy the decision making is.
So the 12th Crown album, studio album, is called
Yep.
Crown of Thorns, and it will be released on the 11th of October through Metal Blade Records. I want to start with the title, Crown of Thorns, which was the original name of the band. Why did you circle
Yeah.
back to this name?
I think it was many things that led to it. I would say one key element was that the artwork. Usually for us at least, the artwork comes in very late in the process, where basically when all the songs are done and you basically book the studio time, then you start to think about artwork. But this time I wanted to turn it around, and the artwork was actually done, I think, 2 years ago already, because I wanted to start in that end, create the artwork, do so we really feel happy and inspired by it, and then me, as I became the main songwriter of it. I really wanted to like look at this cover and turn it around and start thinking to myself, what type of songs do belong in this cover artwork? So that was interesting and very inspiring to do it like that. And since the cover artwork, it was decided that we use a bridge from our hometown Trollhättan. That's what you see on the cover. So the bridge obviously led to a bit of nostalgia. And me, the songwriter, I'm a very melodic songwriter, and that maybe reflects a bit more from very, very old albums like Eternal Death and stuff like that. So, and for like 20 years, we have said, why don't we even have a song called Crown of Thorns? We should do something with it. So all of these things led to this, that it made sense to name this album Crown of Thorns. We even tuned up the guitars a bit like we had in the past. So it just felt good timing to have a sort of self-titled album, but then again, it isn't, but it is. So I think it sort of sums up a lot of the musically and sort of attitude wise what we achieved with the cover and the hometown connection, and then call it Crown of Thorns. So it made sense.
So when you were last on the podcast, we were talking about how Royal Destroyer was almost like a sequel to Cobra Speed Venom, and you had been at the time you were considering doing a trilogy, like maybe like a third part to that style. Is that what Crown of Thorns is, or do you feel like it's very separate from those two albums?
I would say very separate. We had the trilogy discussions early on because we were really happy with World Destroyer, but also I guess it started from when Magnus left the band and I became the main songwriter, because I knew that I had to deliver music, and I find it really, really difficult when I realize that I'm in a comfort zone. I'm not pushing myself. So I wanted to step out of the trilogy thing and create like a new chapter. Let's change everything. The colors of the album. Let's change studio. Let's change tuning. Let's change everything. So I really wanted to, step out of the comfort zone a bit there, and basically mark it as a completely new, fresh album. And the guys were all about that as well. So that was a lot of the mindset to step away from that, because they are the Cobra and Royal, they're very similar in many, many ways. Same studio, artwork, type of songs. I mean, a lot of similarities. So it would have made sense to do a trilogy, but then again, I feel a bit uncomfortable when I realize that I'm trying to be in the comfort zone. So I like to be challenged.
Are you still interested in doing a trilogy, following up from those albums, maybe in the future?
Well, I learned to never say never, but right now it hasn't even crossed my mind. But then again, a lot of things have happened that do cross my mind at the moment. So I'm not ruling anything out. So who knows? Let's see.
So the last time we spoke, you described the songwriting dynamic between you and the other guitarist, Magnus. I think you said Magnus takes a lot of inspiration from old classic death metal bands like Deicide, Morbid Angel, and you bring a lot of stuff from bands like Edge of Sanity. Is that still true with this album?
Yeah, since he's not part of this album, it became more obvious that the end result is more my style, meaning more melodic. And that's what I think you hear on the album. It's quite melodic, and because I that's the way I prefer to write music. I mean, it started out with, I mean, I loved old Scorpions and stuff like that. So it's just been a big part of my songwriting style. I like hooks, I like melodies, certain type of melodies, maybe a bit sad melodies and stuff like that. So since Magnus type of music is now out of the picture, so it's quite natural that the end result is a bit more melodic.
Okay. Uh, Sorry, my mistake. I thought Magnus was on the lineup. Uh, Apologies. Uh,
No. I'm sorry. Yeah, he left. He left the band. Yeah.
Sorry about that. So you talked about your the way you write songs and demo songs. Is that still the same? Are you still doing full demos with drum machines and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's the same way. I think when I talk to other musicians, I mean, how they write music, and it's pretty interesting to see. Everybody seems to have their own way of doing it, but for me, when I write music, I just can't write like like riffs and whatever. I need to need to see the whole picture. So I always write drums to it, and even demo vocals and stuff like that, because I usually when I write a riff, I hear how the vocals should be, I hear how the drums should be. So I'm not saying to the band that this is how it's gonna be, but this is at least how I hear it, and let's work from there. What do you hear when you hear this chorus or whatever? But I always present the ideas that pop into my head. Sometimes the demo versions are pretty close to what you hear in the end, and sometimes stuff happens. Ideas come along in the way, because we still rehearse in this band, and because we just figured out that we write better as a band in the end. It doesn't matter who comes up with the first chunk of all the core of the song, but in the end we all sit there and ponder how to make the song better and come up with ideas. So but yeah, I demo everything. I demo too much.
Does your son Matteo still help with the vocals on the demos?
Yeah, he does. So yeah, that's absolutely amazing. So it's he knows when I knock on his door, he's like, "What?" He knows that I've been writing the whole day. He knows that what my next question will be. So, but yeah, he's cool with that. He helps me, and I present that idea to Johan as well. And sometimes I, in the end, then write the lyrics, and sometimes not. And sometimes Matteo doesn't demo. I let Johan do all the vocal things. But it depends on what I hear in my head, basically, when I do the song. And sometimes, yeah, I'm not. I absolutely are not trying to sort of run over Johan, but it's just that, as I said, I present the idea I have, and yeah, let's at least try it. If it's not good enough, yeah, let's find another way.
So you recorded the last two albums with Frederick Nordstrom, but you recorded
Yeah,
this one yourself. Why did you
yeah.
decide to handle the engineering and the production this time around?
That was also one of those things that since we were determined to do something new and fresh, and one thing in common with both Cobra and Royal was the sound, the choice of Studio Fredman. So absolutely nothing against Frederick. He does one of the best productions still in this business, but we wanted to do it differently, and we decided that I do the recordings, but then again, I wasn't interested in doing the final mixing of it. It becomes a bit too, not maybe difficult, but I mean, I'm a bit too close to the whole band thing to be this. What I think a good engineer or producer is, that he needs to have this helicopter view of things. I can do that since I mix other bands as well. That's not an issue. That's when I have the sort of sky view of the big picture. But when it becomes to my own stuff, maybe it doesn't really work that way. So we decided Jonas Kjellgren should do the mixing, and I know about him for many years. And uh, actually, when I approached him for this album, I noticed on my phone in Messenger we had an old chat going on already around Royal Destroyer about this. So I mean, he has been known to us as a really good sound engineer for a very long time. So, but this time the stars were aligned and he wanted to do it, and I think he did an amazing job. He really brought in exactly what we need, because he's also a fan of the band. He knows, he likes some of the older productions as well and understands what we're about. So, I mean, even on the first mix version he sent to us, I could hear right away that he's not, well, that he is sort of embracing what we're all about, and that is, it's real drums. I mean, it's natural, but it's produced, it's punchy, it's heavy. The bass instrument, it's loud in the mix, and all of those stuff that we want, you know, in your face vocals. And that's how we sort of interpret ourselves, that we should sound like. And he was all about that and aligned to it, and also added a lot of cool stuff, some special effects here and there on vocals. And that's exactly what we need with someone that does the mixing. So he did a really, really good job.
Do you have your own studio or home studio or
Yeah, I
something like
do.
that?
I do.
Okay. And you work
Yeah.
with a lot of bands, right? Like you produced the Sarkader albums.
Yeah. It's I used to run, actually that was when the Crown took this hiatus or break or broke up or whatever. I had a full-on studio that I ran for quite many years, but I recorded and produced a lot of bands, and then times changed and I sold the facility. But then 4 or 5 years ago, I started a studio more focused, you know, on the mixing part, mixing and mastering. So that's what I've been doing for quite many years. I mix albums for bands all around the world, and sometimes I even record them when the stars are aligned. I use a studio here in my hometown. It's very, very high end, so that's where I record like Sarkater's albums and some other stuff as well. But usually I focus on mixing what people have recorded.
As an engineer, can you tell me some of the challenges of recording death metal? Because it seems like between the speed and the
Yeah,
distortion, it's very hard to get a good recording. You know,
it
you're always
is.
navigating
It
between
is.
like the clarity and the power. Like, you know, you don't want to go
Yeah,
one side or the
and
other.
egos, drummer egos. No, that's. It sounds like you maybe have done some engineering yourself, because that's exactly the challenges with the death metal. Because when you think about it, it's quite an impossible genre or style of music to produce or mix, because everything is on 10, everything needs to be loud, and everything needs to be fat and heavy and big, and I mean everything needs to be big. And it and during the years there's been a lot of tricks, you know, you trigger drums to make them more present, and you do whatever tricks and you compress the shit out of everything. And I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you can do, but it is very, very challenging. And since I recorded this album, it was quite interesting to for once do a full-on death metal production with my sort of I don't know, 20 years experience of, you know, recording. I haven't recently recorded death metal bands besides Sarkator that much, but it was interesting to take on this sort of album with everything what I've learned. So obviously I learned quite a lot about, you know, audio separation and, you know, how to actually mic up drums and stuff like that. But one cool decision was that, I mean, ever since from the 90s, everybody said you need to double the guitars, because and back then it made sense because you needed them thicker and wider and whatever. But nowadays that's not necessary. So actually on this album, we didn't double up the guitar. So you only hear one guitar left and right, and there are some additional melodies in the middle. But so you don't really need to double them up and smudge them up. I mean, it's fair enough with two guitars. And also, we tuned up the guitars. That means that you're not dependent, or let's say the other way around. You don't mess with the bass frequencies with the guitars. So they're a bit more in the higher range. You can create
Right.
room
Yeah.
for the bass guitar and stuff like that. So that was really cool. And Jonas, when he sort of heard what I recorded, because in a way I record a bit old school. I sort of what is called commit to tape. I tweak in the sounds that I think is right, and I record it like that.
Yeah.
So because nowadays, yeah, as you probably know, you don't need to commit to anything when you record. You can always tweak and go back and change and reamp and whatever. I mean, that's the one of the problems today, because you can redo everything in so many ways. But I really like to be a bit bold and commit to sounds and sort of live with it and work with it. So when Jonas got the files, he told me, I mean, they sound good, man. So he did his magic on it, and there we were. It became a very good sounding album. I think the best production we had, actually. It has everything we need: the punchiness, the clarity, the nice top high end, and I mean, everything is audible. So that's pretty cool.
So by the time people hear this episode or watch it on YouTube, the 12th Crown album, which is called Crown of Thorns, will be out through Metal Blade Records. Marko, please tell everyone how they can order the album. What's the best way to get it?
I think the best, easiest way is go to metalblade.com/the crown, and there you'll find all those variations of bundles and stuff like that, vinyls and cool stuff. So yeah, that's a good start.
Very cool. And can people get merch and stuff like that through the Bandcamp page?
We have, since a couple of years back, we used to have, the old school classic web page, thecrownofficial.com. So a couple of years ago, we combined that. When you go to thecrownofficial.com, you come to this sort of page that contains information and stories from Instagram, Facebook, and also and in there is a web shop, our own web shop. So that is the best way, thecrownofficial.com.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Marko.